I arrived at the airport with a neatly packed suitcase, a week of PTO logged, and a quiet sense of hope I hadn't allowed myself to feel in years. My dad had nearly died of a heart attack 2 weeks earlier, and in some strange, backward way, it had brought us all into the same room again. He was the one who suggested it, a family trip like we used to do. He even used that exact phrase. I'd stared at the phone in disbelief when he said it. I hadn't heard we in that tone since high school. So I said yes. I paused my work queue, filed backup contact plans, told my manager I'd be remote, unavailable. Family vacation, I told her. First in a decade. She smiled kindly and said, "Go be a daughter. I should have known better." When I got to the Delta check-in line, I gave them my name and confirmation code. The attendant typed, then frowned, typed again. She leaned toward the screen and gave me that practiced, soft, polite voice that always precedes bad news. "I'm sorry, but it looks like your ticket was canceled." I blinked. No, that can't be right. My father booked it for the four of us, my parents, my sister, and me. I confirmed it 2 days ago. She shrugged helplessly. All the others are active. Just yours is missing from the group manifest. It was canceled 3 days ago. I turned, scanning the terminal for their faces, and there they were. My parents stood about 30 feet away, chatting with my sister Madeline. Her long blonde hair was tied up in a neat bun, sunglasses perched on top like a crown. She was smiling. When our eyes met, she didn't look surprised. She looked satisfied. I walked over slowly. Heart thudding. "My ticket's gone," I said flat. "It was canceled." My dad frowned. No, that doesn't make sense. I bought them all together. I paid for the group. I just spoke to the counter. Mine's the only one missing." He turned to my mom. "Gail, did you?" She shook her head, confused. "Of course not." I looked at Maddie. She didn't say a word, just smiled, tilted her head. That same look I remembered from childhood. The one she wore after hiding my college application essay. The one she had when she whispered to a boy I liked that I still wet the bed. "Maddie," I said. "You canceled it, didn't you?" My mom's voice sharpened. "Claire, don't start. She never wanted me to come. You know that." "You're being dramatic," she snapped. "It's just a mistake. Probably a glitch with the airline." I laughed short and bitter. "Right. And it just so happened to glitch on my ticket." My father checked his watch. "We're boarding soon. Maybe we can sort it out with the gate agent." "There are no seats left," I said, "unless one of you wants to stay behind." Silence. That was the moment I knew. I stood there in the center of the terminal, holding nothing but a carry-on bag and the echo of my own name. They didn't say, "We'll cancel the trip." They didn't say, "Come with us tomorrow." They just stared, waiting for me to make it easier for them. And I did. I told them to go. I watched them walk through security, just the three of them. No one turned around. Did she really cancel my ticket? Or did they never plan for me to come in the first place? I didn't always hate my sister. There was a time when I adored her. When she was born, I was 5, old enough to remember the hush that fell over the house before her arrival and the sobs my mother thought I couldn't hear. There had been a stillbirth the year before. A boy. No name ever spoken. After Maddie came, the sun seemed to return. Everyone said it. She was the miracle that healed us, that saved Mom, that made Dad smile again. I didn't mind sharing the light, not at first. But little things added up like dust under a rug. You feel it only when it softens your step. When I was 10, I made honor roll and got a certificate from the mayor. Maddie smeared ketchup on it before I could frame it. "It looks prettier," she said. When I was 12, I played my first piano recital. She unplugged the keyboard 5 minutes before my set. It was buzzing. She told my mother I performed with shaking fingers and no sound. Mom stroked her hair that night and told me not to be so emotional. She's just little Claire. Let her learn, but she never did. She learned how to perform, how to cry at just the right moment, how to tell a version of a story that left out her fingerprints. When I was 15, a boy named Aaron walked me home from youth group. The next day, Maddie told my parents she saw me sneaking into his car. I was grounded for a week. Aaron never called again. When I confronted her, she didn't deny it. "You're not even good at being liked," she said, twisting her friendship bracelet around her wrist. "Might as well let someone who is do the work." I told Mom. She smiled tightly and handed me a dish towel. "You girls are always competing. Let it go." By the time I was 17, I stopped talking about school wins. I stopped trying to bring home good news. Everything I did seemed to make Maddie louder, brighter, more wounded. When I got into UNC Chapel Hill on a scholarship, Maddie spent the week in bed crying about how no one would ever be proud of her. My parents didn't come to move-in day. It's a hard time for Maddie. Mom had said, "She needs us close." That first night in my dorm, I made a cup of ramen and watched the hallway lights flicker. I remember thinking, this is what it feels like to disappear without dying. Years passed, I built a life, got my degree, moved to Asheville, learned to pay bills on time, show up early to meetings, send cards on birthdays that never got returned. Every now and then, I'd drive home for Thanksgiving. Maddie would roll her eyes when I walked in, sit at the opposite end of the table, interrupt me, mid-sentence with something louder. My parents didn't correct her. They passed the gravy and changed the subject. The last time I visited, she borrowed my laptop and forgot to return it for 2 weeks. When I got it back, half the keys were missing. My parents told me to be gracious. "You're so strong, Claire," Mom said. "She needs more help than you ever did." That sentence stayed with me. It wasn't just that they favored her. It was that they'd built a whole version of me that made her cruelty. Okay, if I had disappeared completely, would anyone have even noticed, or would they have just called it peaceful? I moved to Asheville for work and never moved back. It wasn't dramatic. There was no big fight, no final door slam. I just stopped offering pieces of myself no one asked for. I rented a small one-bedroom near the river. The ceiling fan rattled when it rained, and the kitchen tile was cracked under the sink, but it was mine. I kept a plant alive for 3 years, bought groceries on Sunday, paid my electric bill early. I didn't cut off my family. I answered calls. I sent cards on holidays. I mailed my dad a book once about heart health and scrawled a note in the cover. "Take care of yourself. Some of us still need you here." He never mentioned it. When Maddie graduated high school, she didn't have the grades for a university, so she enrolled in community college and stayed home. My mom posted pictures of her on Facebook every week. Maddie at the farmer's market. Maddie at church. Maddie with a rescued kitten. No mention of me, but I didn't expect it anymore. I had a life now, a quiet, careful one. I made real friends, not many, but the kind who remembered my coffee order and texted when it snowed to ask if I needed salt. I took walks in the botanical garden behind my building. I watched couples argue over mulch at Lowe's and thought, this is what peace looks like. It's not loud. It doesn't beg to be seen. Then the call came. My mom's voice was tight, not crying but close. "Your dad's had a heart episode. It was serious. They brought him back, but it was close." I booked a train that night. The next morning, I was back in Greenville, standing in a beige hospital hallway, watching my father sleep beneath a plastic blanket. He looked smaller than I remembered. Maddie didn't look at me when I walked in. She scrolled her phone in the corner, earbuds in. I stayed a week, worked remote from their dining room table, kept the house quiet, made sure he took his meds. I fixed a loose cabinet hinge and replaced the batteries in the smoke detector, things no one noticed, but I did them anyway. At breakfast one morning, Dad looked at me across the table and said, "We should take a trip, all 4 of us. It's been too long." I waited for someone to laugh. No one did. He meant it. I hesitated, but then I thought about the way he gripped the stair rail now, how he winced when reaching for his coffee. Something in him had shifted, and maybe foolishly, I hoped something in them had too. So I said yes. I requested time off. I cleared my schedule, emailed my manager, updated my calendar. I packed simple linen shirts, a pair of sandals, a dog-eared novel I'd been saving for years. I wanted to believe this time might be different, that maybe after everything we could sit on a porch somewhere and talk like people who remembered each other's first names. But when the time came when I stood in that airport with a bag in my hand and a ticket that didn't scan, all I saw was Maddie smiling. And all I felt was stillness, not rage, not hurt, just the quiet confirmation that nothing had changed. When did I stop trying to be seen and just start watching from afar? 3 days after they left, my phone buzzed just past 5 a.m. It was my mother missed calls, 7 of them. Then one text, "Call me now, it's an emergency." I didn't think. I called. She answered on the first ring, voice low and uneven. "It's your dad," she whispered. "Something's wrong." My chest tightened. Is he in the hospital again? No, he's stable. But his pills are disappearing. I sat up fully awake. What do you mean disappearing? His morning medication, the carvedilol. There were 15 left when we packed. Now there's barely 4, and we haven't skipped any. My mind clicked through possibilities. Miscounting housekeeping mistake. Then I heard her voice drop lower. I went into Madeline's room to borrow sunscreen. She wasn't there. Her bag was unzipped. I found the pills, all of them stuffed in a side pocket. I didn't speak right away. I could hear the ocean outside her hotel window, waves rolling in like breath. She could have killed him, she said finally, and I couldn't tell if it was grief or disbelief in her voice. She wouldn't have taken them by accident, I said. No, my mother said softly. No, she wouldn't have. I told her not to confront Maddie. Not yet. Not while they were stuck abroad. They needed to document everything. Take photos. Secure the pills. Wait until they got home. She'll talk her way out of it, I said. She always does, but not if you have evidence. My mother hesitated. Your father wants to speak to her tonight. He says she needs to hear it from him. I wanted to stop them. I knew how this would go. But I also knew my father quiet until he wasn't, and when he wasn't, it was already too late to redirect. That night, they called again. This time, it was Dad. His voice shook. She exploded, he said. Claire, I've never seen anything like it. He told me they sat her down calmly, just the two of them. They showed her the pills. Asked why, Maddie laughed. Then she screamed. She accused them of betrayal, said they were trying to humiliate her, called them liars, said she saw them replacing her with me, said Dad should have died if he was just going to bring me back into their lives. She started throwing things, he said, a lamp, her shoes. She picked up the hotel phone and screamed at the front desk. Security was called, then the police. They arrested her. My dad whispered, Your sister. They took her in cuffs. Claire. She kept shouting your name, like this was about you. I didn't know what to say. She wasn't shouting at me. She was shouting at the version of me that had never existed, the phantom sister who took nothing but was blamed for everything. She's been released, he added, but we're keeping separate rooms now. The hotel helped us change floors. There was a pause. We didn't know, he said, voice cracking. We really didn't know. I almost believed him. But they had known, somewhere deep down beneath the excuses and the staged smiles they'd known for years. They just never said it aloud until the consequences knocked. What happens when the golden child finally gets exposed and she turns on the people who created her? The next call came less than 24 hours later. This time, my mother wasn't whispering. Her voice was high-sharp with panic. Claire, we can't find our passports. I blinked. What? Both of them gone and our wallets. They were in the drawer by the bed last night now. They're just gone. I stood in the middle of my kitchen, still holding my coffee. The steam curled past my face. Did you check with the front desk? Housekeeping. We did nothing. Turned in Ron's ID. My credit cards, everything all gone. I didn't say anything. My mom's voice broke. We think she took them. It made sense after what happened. After being arrested, after being told for the first time in her life that she had gone too far, and now she was making sure they couldn't leave without her. She said my mom whispered that if we ever chose you again, we'd regret it. I sat down, slowly. It wasn't about pills anymore, or even rage. It was control. The only thing Maddie had ever needed more than attention. We're stuck. Claire, no IDs, no cards, no passports. We can't fly. We can't book a new hotel. We can't even rent a car to get to the consulate. We have nothing. The line went quiet for a moment, then she added softly, We need your help. There it was. The words I'd never heard from her mouth. Not when I moved out. Not when I graduated. Not when I got promoted. Not when I sat alone at Thanksgiving while they took family photos without me. We need you. I wired them money through Western Union. Enough to get to the embassy. Rebook a hotel. Then I stayed on the phone, walking them through the steps. I looked up the consulate hours, drafted an affidavit for lost documents, pulled up a guide to emergency passport replacement, and emailed it in a PDF. I didn't scold. I didn't gloat. I treated it like I would for a stranger who needed help. Later that night, my dad called. I want to say, I'm sorry, he said. We should have seen it earlier. There was a pause. We just didn't know how to admit it, that we'd been wrong. I let him speak. We called you dramatic, he said. We called you jealous, but you were just telling the truth, weren't you? Yes, I said. Another silence. Then his voice quieter. And you still helped us. I wasn't going to leave you stranded. I wouldn't have blamed you if you had. I didn't say it, but I would have blamed myself. Not because I owed them, but because I couldn't become the person they once accused me of being cruel by nature. Vindictive. Small, I wasn't small. I just remembered too much. Maddie didn't speak to them for the rest of the trip. She refused to give back the passports. Eventually, she dropped them at the front desk without a word. No apology. No explanation. My parents flew home 2 days later quieter than I'd ever seen them. They didn't call when they landed, but 2 mornings after that, I found a package on my doorstep. Inside was the book I had sent my dad, the one about heart health I thought he'd forgotten. There was a note in the cover in his handwriting. Thank you for keeping me alive in every way that mattered. Could I have walked away this time? Yes, but maybe the point wasn't proving them wrong, just letting them see. I'd been right all along. Maddie didn't unravel. She detonated. Once they got back home, she refused to speak to them for 2 days. Then, as if those hours of silence had sharpened into blades, she began lashing out, not with words, but with control. She took their car keys and hid them twice. Once, when my father had a follow-up cardiology appointment, she smashed a set of dishes when my mom asked her to lower the volume on the TV. One night, she dragged a chair into the hallway, sat down, and played the same 3-second clip on her phone on loop until dawn. I told my parents to document everything. I told them it wasn't just tantrums anymore. It was a pattern. It was dangerous. They agreed, quietly, carefully. Then it escalated again. She came at my father with a kitchen knife during an argument. It wasn't deep, just a scrape along his forearm, but that didn't matter. He was bleeding, and it was enough. They called the police. Maddie was arrested this time for assault. She didn't cry, didn't beg. She just stared at them like they'd betrayed her for the last time. They pressed charges. Not because they wanted to punish her, but because it was the only way to get her out of the house. They filed a restraining order, changed the locks, hired an attorney. I didn't go down for the hearing. I watched it all unfold from my apartment in Asheville, tracking court documents, reading texts that came in like storm warnings. She's still calling from the county jail. Should we answer? I told them no. She'd had their attention for years. Let the silence sit where it belonged now. When the eviction order was finalized, I offered to have them come stay with me for a while. Not out of guilt, just to give them time to breathe, and maybe quietly to see who I had become when I wasn't being erased. They arrived 2 days later with 2 duffel bags and the look of people who had just crawled out of something they built themselves. I set up the guest room with fresh towels, stocked the fridge with decaf, and left a spare key in a drawer they could find without asking. We didn't talk about Maddie. We didn't talk about much at first. But on the 3rd morning, my dad sat beside me on the back porch, watching the fog lift off the Blue Ridge foothills. He handed me a mug of coffee and cleared his throat like he wasn't sure if he deserved to speak. You were never the problem, he said. I nodded. My mother joined us a little later. She didn't say anything, just wrapped a cardigan tighter around her shoulders and looked out past the trees like she was trying to see her way back to a version of herself that hadn't believed the worst things. That afternoon, I pulled out a small envelope from my desk drawer. Inside was a printout of their return flight information. I'd booked it for the following Monday. I left it on the kitchen table under a smooth river stone, the kind people put on graves or promises. On the morning of their departure, I hugged my mother. She held on a second longer than I expected. My father looked like he wanted to say something else, but I didn't ask him to. At the door, I handed them the envelope again. There's a second copy in your suitcase, I said, in case this one gets lost. He looked at it, then looked at me. Thank you, he said. I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I just nodded and closed the door after them. I never disappeared. They just built a world that was easier when I did. But now they know I was always here, watching, waiting, and finally choosing not to vanish.